This video serves as an introduction to making role-playing events. We're going to talk about some basic considerations, how to structure your event, and give you some ideas with some common event types. And by the end of the video, you should have all you need to make pretty much any kind of role-playing event, or at least have just the general outline. It's a very modular setup that kind of lets you create any kind of event with it. Now, of course, there's a lot more depth to it than that, but let's go ahead and get into the very basics. So, some basic considerations. The first thing you want to ask is, who is the event for? Is the event for a bunch of social role players? Is it some kind of restaurant themed thing? Is the event for a bunch of adventurers who are out there to go after some people for some adventure, for some treasure, something like that? When is it going to happen? Is it going to happen on a Friday night? Is it going to... Excuse my cat. Is it going to happen on a Friday night during prime time? Because you want to consider the time zone of your guild when people typically are off work. And then, of course, another big question there along with that is, how long is your event going to last? Now, roleplay events typically last anywhere from 1 to 2 hours. 1 hour is usually for very simple, straightforward events, very commonly repeated events. In a structured role-playing guild, things like these commonly run the lines between academies for training and introducing people to different role-playing styles and different structures within the guild, to crafting events, crafting weapons, crafting equipment, crafting different peripheral things for them to add to the character sheet. They're typically often repeated. You may have some of these similar training events throughout the day. When it comes to the social side of things, you tend to have more straightforward structure. You may have a repeatable format like a nightclub. You usually want to run those 2 hours or more. Sometimes you can leave those more open-ended, or you can kind of conclude them, kick everyone out who's still there, but you kind of can leave it open for people to trickle in and out, right? And then the final thing you want to consider, how are you going to announce your event? How are people going to know about it? At this point in these videos, this is kind of assumed that you're part of a role-playing community. If you're going to be hosting your own events, you likely have a community in which you're going to be hosting them in. So whether it's a guild, a free company, or a fellowship, you have a place of other role players in mind that you're a part of that can attend these kind of events. Well, a lot of times those guilds will have a Discord server set up that complements the guild where the schedule is kept. Those events are then announced on the server before they happen. So usually you have them on a schedule which goes out weekly that people can look up and reference, and then when it comes time to hosting your event, a very common thing is to give an earlier announcement 1 hour out, then 30 minutes out, then 15 minutes out, and then maybe 10 or 5 minutes for your final announcement before you begin. And of course you want to be announcing it in-game as well, not just through the Discord, but letting people in your free company or guild know, hey, the event's going to start in this time. Put an X in the chat. And if I see that X, I'm going to invite you into the group for the guild, for the event, right? The next part is structuring the event. Big question when you're structuring and writing down on a sheet of paper some different things for your event is, where is it going to take place? And it's a great question. Is this a social event that's going to take place in your free company's house? We're going to have something decorated that you can invite people to for the event if you're doing something like that. When it comes to an adventure, you want to think about a couple things. One really good thing to do, and I strongly recommend this if you're brand new, is finding a place in the game world itself, in-game, to bring people together for that event. Now, you could make your own, stronghold, private property stuff, and transform that into a dungeon, into an exploratory area for people to come in and adventure through. You can kind of customize it to look however you want for the most part, and you're also kind of isolated from being out in the open public with a large group of people. Occasionally, some players will come by and harass the role players if they see a bunch of people, grouped up with their weapons out. They're usually pretty young. And by the way, if that happens, completely ignore it. Don't say a single thing to them. They're going to go away and get bored very fast. Don't feed into any of it. But think about where you want it to take place. And then what you want to consider is, how will people get there? You're probably not new to role-playing events. If you are in a role-play community, you've probably been to some, so think about how people are going to get there, depending on the game that you're playing. Now, in SWTOR, they have a really nice feature for you for summoning your operations group, which is like your alliance or your raid group, right? Everyone funnels into the raid group before it begins. Well, in SWTOR, they funnel into the operations group, and then you can summon everyone to your location outside in the world itself. And then you have things like private strongholds and private property for guilds. Can you invite people in, or maybe people can easily find a way to get themselves to you? Other times they may have to find you, and you want to think about ways to make it very convenient for people to find you. In some games, you may have to teleport to a certain area, and there may be no way to shuttle someone else to your location. When it comes to structuring the event, what will happen? Does it serve a direct purpose, or is this more of an adventure? If this is an example where, we're going into a dungeon and we're going to go fight a boss and bring back some nice treasure, I'm going to think about, okay, how are we going to get there? What's the story for how we all arrive on scene? If there's a puzzle to solve or a place for them to explore as they're there, they're going to have to make their way through a dangerous network of traps. Finally, we get to some combat, whether it's the inhabitants of, that dungeon we're exploring, or even some other people from the outside competing with us, and maybe finishing off with a nice good fight. And just keep in mind it does take time when it comes to MMO roleplay, and battle in MMO roleplay takes a long time, so anything you can do to make that more convenient and more brief is better, especially if you're starting out. And of course, I'll talk in future videos about how to handle combat. Let's talk about event types just to kind of give you some ideas. I'm going to break it down to social and structured. Now, these two are not dichotomous. It's not a false dichotomy. And the social side of things, you have nightclubs a lot of times where you have a bunch of people just hanging out. Usually someone's managing the bar. Maybe you have entertainment on staff. This can be things from DJ to dancers and whatnot. And you usually want to designate your people that are going to be in those positions if you're in the management position. If you're starting out, you're probably not managing a nightclub unless you're going it alone. But if you're going into a social community of role players and you're just starting out, you're probably not going to be leading that because that's more of a management kind of thing. But just so you know, that's kind of how you want to structure it. Who's going to be working what areas. Get confirmation ahead of time so everyone's on the same page for that. On the structure side of things, you have lots of adventure and story. That's your action, your dynamic combat and stuff like that, your structure, your dungeon crawling. That's your premium content in structured roleplay. On the social side of things, you may have something like a meet and greet so that players can get to know each other. It's also a great thing in structured roleplay. Meet and greet typically is a place for people to come and relax and get to know each other, especially if they're new to the guild or fellowship or free company. Talk about some basic things and getting to roleplay with the character for the first time. Excellent icebreaker, by the way, if they're new to roleplay. On the structure side of things, you typically have in this place being your trainings or academies, depending on what kind of structured role-playing guild that you're running. In Final Fantasy XIV, this may be, for example, training to be an adventurer. We have the Halls of the Novice, right? Well, maybe your free company has a Halls of the Novice, where you kind of introduce players new to your free company to the way that you guys do things in the guild. The combat system, the dice. Maybe everyone has, the set up a character sheet, and this is the event where you kind of introduce what those different things in the character sheet mean. Back in the social side of things, you have one-off things like weddings. Those are actually, pretty simple to set up, right? You have a certain time and date planned for it. So-and-so and thus and such are getting married. So-and-so is going to be the minister. Maybe they say some nice things, bring them together. They're married and you're good to go. It's a one-off event, pretty straightforward. And the structure side of things, obviously not the equivalent, but another example you can use is crafting. A lot of times you may have different items and stuff in the guild which provide different mechanical bonuses or even just color and flavor bonuses. And maybe you have a document set up that people can reference before they attend. And then finally, on the social side of things, you have restaurants. And these are, again, more managerial things to run. You have to usually run your own restaurant or be in the leadership position of whatever free company you're in to kind of host these things, because you need to have the different people that are the cooks, you have the different servers and stuff like that. Many times you don't have cooks, but if you want to add to it, you have the cooks in the small kitchen, and you have then your servers that are really interacting with the customers and go role play with them. And then on the structure side of things, you have campaigns. Campaigns tend to be your big events, and they typically are adventure stories. Your campaigns are usually a story taking place over time. And even if you're doing a campaign, usually you're in high level leadership of the guild. But the idea is that you have a long-term story that you're telling. Each time you do an event, like maybe a 2-hour story every week or so, you have it set up to where it's kind of a one-off thing. I strongly recommend. You don't want to really do part 3, part 4, part 5, because a lot of times people will see that in the announcements and not want to attend because they weren't there for the earlier ones. Try to make each event that you do of these fully isolated to its own, to where those who have been there before may get something more out of it by recognizing recurrent NPCs or something, but keep it to where it's its own thing, isolated, so that everyone can enjoy it, whether they've been for the previous events in the campaign or they're just coming in. So I hope this was helpful. This is just a very basic introduction into making your own kind of role-playing events. What's out there, maybe give you some ideas. Now this is devoid of a lot of technical stuff because I do want to make more videos to really get in depth on dungeon mastering for role-playing events. And of course, replace dungeon mastering with whatever your preferred term is. The dungeon master, game host, event host. I want to get into a lot of the detail of handling those kind of events, mechanics, combat, things like that. Let me know in the comments what your preferred method is for building your own events if you've ever done it before. And thanks for watching this video. There's a playlist over there if you want to check out some of my other role-playing videos. And thanks for watching. Bye-bye.